A bloodbath tonight in the rural town of Chinook.
Everyone here is hiding a secret.
4 more victims found scattered.
Some worse than others. I came as fast as I could. I'm Deputy Ruth Vogel. And soon, my quiet life will never be the same.
Realm presents a 30 Ninjas production, Chinook, starring Kelly Marie Tran and Sanaa Lathan. Listen to Chinook wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, I'm Alison Larkin, writer, comedian, narrator, and host of the Jane Austen podcast. Join me as we embark on a journey through Austen's timeless stories, starting with Pride and Prejudice. The Jane Austen podcast with Alison Larkin is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. My name is Anne Foster, and this is Empress Sisi, part 3. So this week we wrap up Sisi's story, which has some more content warnings, so just keep your ears peeled for that, and they will be noted in the show notes as well. But otherwise, Lana Wood Johnson is back. We're going to get to the scoring. It's a really challenging one to score because Sisi is really unlike other people we've examined on this podcast. I also wanted to tell you a little behind the scenes info that this had been originally planned to be the season finale of the internationale season, but then by accident, I found 3 more stories that I want to share. So there's going to be several more weeks worth of vulgar history coming up. But just so you know, everything after this is kind of like unplanned, spontaneous bonus episodes. Anyway, I also wanted to mention that, so I know you've all been enjoying Lana Wood Johnson on this podcast. You can learn more about her and her books and herself at our website, which is lanawoodjohnson.com. So enjoy Sisi part 3.
If you want to pair her in a romantic story, you do a horse girl story. That's it, beginning and end.
Oh my God. I think we're just getting into her like horse girl, like the return era. Yes. Okay. So she, like as a child, she loved riding horses. And then like as she was being the Empress, like she did horseback riding a lot. And then this is where she got into, I said already. So she got that like home in Budapest in Hungary, go Tolo. And then she picked up the bug and she started to love fox and stag hunts. So, but again, he also talks about like she just inherently, like the same way that like, Olympic athletes are good at swimming because of their physiology or whatever. Like she was just good at being a horse riding person.
She probably had a really good center of gravity.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm tall and I have no center of gravity and I will literally fall down just standing still. But sometimes when you're taller, you have that good balance. And I think she was one of those people that had that.
She also had ankle length, very thick hair.
When she had counterbalance.
She had a horse mane of hair on herself. That's how much of a horse girl she was. So she started taking a bunch of trips to the British Isles. So, this is the British Isles. She went to England. She also went to Ireland, which like caused a bit of an international scandal because they were in the midst of like various England versus Ireland things. But she's like, the fox hunting here is good. What's the problem? And they're all just like, Sisi.
I'm sorry you're fighting with this whole nationalism thing. I want to hunt.
Yeah. So between 1876 and 1882, so she went to both England and Ireland a lot. She maintained several stables, participated in fox and stag hunts, and she was like really good at it. So I think that's part of what the newspapers were being like, oh my God, guess what she just did? She's the best equestrienne. A frequent riding companion was the famed British equestrian George Bay Middleton, a distant ancestor of the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton, which is a connection that delights me. So Bay Middleton.
It's about time that she gets some sort of connection, right?
You know what? Prince William has enough.
Huh?
So George Bay Middleton was someone who's just like, I love this narrative. This is like, there was that movie that was like Victoria and her best friend, Billy Connolly. I forget the name of the real life person.
Yes.
But this is like what, if I was going to do a Sisi movie, it would be like this era. It would be like Sisi, who would be played by, I don't know, Gwendolyn Christie in a really long wig or something. And then Oh no, Elisabeth Debicki. And then you get the guy from Outlander, any of the guys from Outlander, to be this guy because he had red hair and he was Scottish, I think. Bay Middleton, who was just like, he's like, I'm not going to be just like a Sherpa guide for this like random royal. And then she showed up, she was so good on a horseback, and he's just like, okay, we're friends now. And he was just like, this is happening. And he was like the one person that she would like yell at her and like instruct her, but she took to it because she's a horse girl and he's like a horse guy. And this is a horse-based relationship.
It's entirely stable based.
People are like, oh, and he traveled with her like to Hungary and all this stuff so that he could like help oversee her horses. And people are like, oh, is that her lover? And it's like, no, horses.
He's a stable guy. Like he just knows things. Just
yeah, no,
it's not the same.
So Bay Middleton, and just this story is just another man friend. But then eventually she had sciatica, which I don't know how much that's exacerbated by having ankle length hair and what that does to your spine.
And training your waist. And like, she wasn't doing any nice things to her nerves.
Which is interesting because it was seen as like, she's very interested in her health, is how people phrased it.
That is that lie that everybody always says. It's like, well, if you're skinny, you're interested in your health. Like just because you have a good metabolism, you must be very healthy.
Yeah.
And it reinforces a lot of things. So she wasn't interested in her health. She was interested in her physical appearance.
Yeah. I think that it's
if she was interested in her health, she would eat square meals every day.
Yeah.
And stop exercising when it hurt.
I think this is an era, and again, I do not know this era very well, but there's the the guys who invented Special K cereal. They're all the like health spas.
Oh yes. Like, do not make you watch Road to Wellville. Do not make you watch that.
So this is like when people say like Sisi was interested in her health, it's like she's a person who thinks about the food she eats. And to people in like 1870, they were like, to us, that's what health means. It's like thinking about your food. Anyway, they're just baby steps towards.
Oh yeah, no, the Kellogg's guys were a lot. They were running a utopian cult. So yeah,
right. But I mean, like that's a sort of health that people are like. She was interested in health. They mean kind of like
washing your hands, and I just needed them to wash their hands.
Yeah, she wasn't interested in that, but she was interested anyway. It's like it's the equivalent today of being interested in like crystals and essential oils, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
is what the Kellogg brothers were doing, not her.
Like this was a very idealistic period in time too, because there was this weird lull in everyone hating each other, so there was a lot of knowledge transfer and all of that stuff. And so people spent a lot more time like learning from each other and learning different techniques and skills and knowledge and exploring new things. So there's a lot of like socialism and utopianism, and that's why I did my paper on French utopians of this period. But
no, but that's the context. This is important to know. I think like the context of like where she's getting the ideas for the stuff that she does is coming from this kind of larger school of like weird ideas people are giving each other.
Yeah, like there's a lot of like calisthenics. You don't need to exercise when you work the land all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
But you do need to exercise when you stand in front of a machine and pull a lever all day.
Oh, yeah. No, and
that switch from agrarian to industrialization switched how people worked, how people lived, where their food came from, what they ate. And so there was this new interest in what of these old ways were actually helping us and which ones were actually hurting us.
No, but then that gets into like, I wrote a whole paper about this. Like at the same time that women were having green sickness, which is just kind of like hysteria, but for young virgins. But men were having this, like people started experiencing, like doctors started, like the medical establishment started being more of a thing, but it started just being like, why do all these people have what I'm going to call ennui? Like, but it could be anxiety or depression. They called it like green sickness, or there's a word for it for men, but it was basically that. It's exactly what you're saying. It's like, if all you do is go to a factory and pull a lever all day, then like your body's going to get fucked up. Like this could like cause things in your mental health.
You lose mental stimulation. You lack mental stimulation. You work 16 jobs. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt.
So it
was a social shift as well. And then there was all these intellectual people. They're like, this is interesting, because it was new. New things are fun.
No, but that reminds me too. So Sisi is traveling around, and as she's traveling, she's visiting like lunatic asylums. I don't know what else to call them. Sorry, but like,
no, that's what they were. I mean, that was their term.
But that was an interest of hers. She would go and visit them and see like, well, what techniques are you using, and like, how are the people being because she was intellectually very curious in mental health.
This was still pre-Freud. Like, we're still in the barely pre-Freud, but keeping in mind that Freud was from Austria. So the things that she's doing and her family influences are influences of his, and her interest in these mental health, these asylums, made the asylums in Austria a thing that him as a neuroscientist started to realize there's more to this. There's more to this. He needs to study it in a different way than just, I cut open a brain and look at it.
No, this is at the very beginning of when we started recording. You said like, if she lived today, she would have gone to medical school. She could have been a psychologist. And I'm just like, yeah, that was like, that would have been great.
She would have been a psychologist equestrian.
That's an equestrian / social worker. Oh my God, horse therapy. She could
have done therapy. She would have totally she knew horse therapy was a thing. She would have been so far all over that.
Yeah. So sciatica, eventually she couldn't ride horses anymore. So she took up, just because she had to keep moving, fencing and hiking. Eventually, it used to be like a thing that people fought and competed to be the lady in waiting to the Empress, but now no one really wanted to. And she chose people based on like, who can keep up with me on like an 8-hour mountain climb every day. And that was how she chose her attendants.
That is not one of the jobs that Elisabeth I's ladies in waitings ever had to deal with. It's like, wait, what do you mean an 8-hour hike?
Yeah. You've been a lady in waiting. Okay, here's your like fitness test. Like, let's just see if you are up to the task. So she was traveling all the time, whatevering. But she also, I like this detail. So her husband was still in Vienna, just being like, I love my wife who's not here. And she was like, if I'm leaving him, like, I don't want him to be lonely. So she like facilitated him taking a lover who was an actress called Katharina Schratt. They saw her in a play and he thought she was pretty. And Sisi was like, oh, you thought she's pretty? She like invited Katharina over.
You should sleep with her.
The excuse was like, every time Katharina came over, she was described as like Sisi's friend. Like, oh, Sisi's friend, Katharina. Like, Katharina got her own like apartments. Like, and it was all just like under the guise of like Sisi's friend. So she's like, that's handled great. I'm going to just go like travel everywhere now. When she traveled.
Only time where the mistress was the idea of, well, no, there's many times where this, but it's like one of those few times where like, no, oh, you want a no, you don't want a mistress, but you could have one. Like, let's see.
Their daughter Valerie in her writings was kind of like appalled that her mother had like arranged this all, but Sisi was just like, gotta do what I gotta do. When she traveled, she didn't travel under her own name. She used the pseudonym the Countess of Hohenems, which I thought was like an anagram or a made-up word, but actually that's a place. And so she's just pretending to be the Countess of Hohenems.
It's a very Bavarian name.
Yeah.
Tyrol, Bavarian, Alpen, German sounding word.
So she traveled, and when she went places, like if people knew she was the Empress, then the police would be like, we're going to like, we have to like, because, sorry, we're going to get to this. So don't get into too much now, Lana, but there's like assassinations are happening. There's anarchists assassinating people.
Anarchists everywhere.
Franz Joseph avoided several of these attacks.
Socialists, utopians, a couple utopians, not many, just a couple.
Yeah. So it's sort
That
of
was
like,
actually, no, this is the exact time period when I was telling you. I did a whole history of socialist utopian assassinations for Anne in preparation for this podcast. This is the same time period as the utopian from the Oneida Colony killed James A. Garfield, President of the United States.
and that's when Teddy Roosevelt became president.
No. That's 1901. That's after Sisi.
Who became president?
That was an anarchist.
Oh, sorry.
That was
totally,
an anarchist
totally
who was trying to impress Emma Goldman.
Emma Goldman.
Sorry, yes, Emma Goldman.
Emma Goldman.
Where that name came from.
I don't know, but Emma Goldman, the famous. Is she an anarchist? Yeah.
Anarchist. She is the queen of the anarchists.
Best known to me
had queens
from the musical Ragtime. Anyway, so Sisi is just coming into her own like self-actualization, traveling around Europe during like an incredibly dangerous time for like the Empress of Austria to be traveling around. So Franz Joseph, her husband, was like, okay, I'm going to arrange like wherever she goes, I'm going to like make sure the local police force like escorts her like a bodyguard. And she was just like, how dare you? So they had to like secretly follow her around. And if she ever noticed one of them was following her around, she would like skedaddle and just like run away. So like, anyway, she was just like, I do not want bodyguards. Stop this.
You're making it worse.
Yeah. So she's traveling around with various people who I think when they were walking, they would also be talking about things that interest her. So I'm not going to say all of them, but there's like various Greek people. Oh, this is where like she learned modern Greek. So Constantine Christomanos, who I mentioned before. So he's a playwright and theater director. His memoirs of Sisi were banned by the Viennese court.
That's how you know they're good.
Yeah. So one of her other travel companions was Constantine Manos, who became a resistance fighter against the Turks in Crete. And Marinos Marinaki, a future sportsman and co-founder of the famous Greek soccer club Panathinaikos. She's also accompanied by a Swedish therapist, Arvid Ludvig Kellgren. I'm not sure if that means like a physical therapist or like a mental therapist.
It was probably an alienist. Let me double check.
Arvid Ludvig Kellgren. While Lana's checking that, I'm going to say that she also continued, like she liked visiting hospitals, seeing people, helping out. She arrived at hospitals and charity wards unannounced with only go ahead.
He was a physiotherapist, so he was probably most likely for her sciatica.
He might encourage her to cut her hair. That's what I would do.
If he was any good at his job, he would encourage her to cut her hair.
I wonder if, I assume Franziska was still there doing her hair. Anyway, during her travels, she'd go to hospitals and charity wards unannounced. Here she displayed surprisingly down-to-earth behavior for a royal, holding hands with the dying and speaking to patients about their needs. So one of her lady-in-waitings wrote, truly like an angel of mercy, she went from bed to bed. I saw the tears trickling down the faces of the men. And then by the 1880s, her mental health stuff was getting new manifestations, such as she started doing things like randomly entering strangers' homes.
So did Robert Downey Jr., and he's fine.
Yeah. But this was also an era where this was like this traveling. This is when she and Ludwig were very close. So her favorite play was A Midsummer Night's Dream. And she referred to herself as Titania, Queen of the Fairies. I think Ludwig had like an alter ego persona as well. Yeah. And they just sort of like were together, just like pretending like they didn't have to be in charge of anywhere and just like being what are they called? The Whittles box. Just like
very Bavarian together. They were being very Bavarian.
He'd just be like, look at this cool castle I'm building. And she'd be like, I'm going to look at this new psychiatric fact I learned. And they're just like having a nice time together. And then a bunch of people die.
It's turned very, very dark. And so this is the same era as a lot of spiritualism was going down.
Definitely. And that is a thing that she definitely turned to in this era. So Ludwig died. We talked about him before, the mysterious like murder or maybe suicide. She always assumed it was suicide just because she knew about his like melancholy and stuff. Her father died. And then the Mayerling incident happened. Mayerling?
Mayerling.
So this is a content warning for suicide.
And grooming. And grooming.
Suicide and grooming.
And murder.
And murder. So My lovely editor, Christina, is doing God's work this week, putting all timestamps in for when all these contents happen. So if you want to skip ahead, just check in the notes for the episode and you can skip ahead to when this part is done. But this is a very famous thing. Well, the fact that it's called the Mayerling Incident, like it's got a name.
Well, that's mostly because it is the era of newspapers.
Right.
And newspapers need a discrete term to advertise around.
That's true. And they can't call it Mayerling Gate yet because Watergate hasn't happened. So Sisi's one son.
Too short.
Remember her son Rudolph, who was like very sensitive and very similar to her, not thriving in a military school. So then she took over and switched his schooling. So he grew up and he continued to be a very, all those family traits sort of person, including the mental health part of that lineage.
He also had obsessive thoughts. And so this whole incident is a result of him, like, this is his third attempt at this specific thing. He needed to find the right girl.
Okay. So just to begin at the beginning. So Rudolph had been dealing with some depressive issues for a while. He even, he was never close to his mother because he was born before she's allowed to be close to her children. But although she did rescue him from the schooling that wasn't helping him thrive. But anyway, he like did at some point maybe try to confide in her, but she was just kind of like she's kind of checked out about him. And she's just kind of like, I'm busy being Titania, Queen of the Fairies with Ludwig. So like another time.
I only have enough time for one mentally ill relative and it's going to be Ludwig right now and myself.
Yeah. And it's me. Thank you. Anyway, so, well, you can talk about this. So
he had a series of lovers. He was married and he had a daughter.
He was married and his wife's name was Stephanie, which is the most 1995 name of a person in like the 1800s I've ever experienced.
My gift to Anne is a story where all of the women have different names.
Please.
When possible, I try to find as many different female names for Anne so that she doesn't have to do any research or nicknames.
Yep.
But in this particular case, Rudolph, he did his job. He had a wife. He had a daughter. He did not have a son. But he became obsessed with this idea of murder-suicide. And his wife was not going to do it.
Stephanie was not into it.
Stephanie was barely into him. So being his like victim was not a thing. So he found like a couple other lovers to try to convince to his case, and they did not. So he groomed a 15-year-old and convinced her she was so desperately in love with him that they were going to die. They were going to commit murder-suicide. No one's going to stop him. He's the crown prince. No one's going to stop him from having a lover. No one's going to stop. This was just a thing that got in his head and he was going to do. And he did it. So he went out into the country, into a hunting lodge and murdered her and then himself, and didn't do a great job of it. Like they eventually found him and tried to take him to the hospital, but he did die along the way. And it was super traumatic. Like everything about it was really traumatic. And they tried to make it look like it was a murder, like a full-on murder, that someone was jealous. And the newspapers found that out. Like it was a very messy tabloid scandal of someone who did not have the help he needed and didn't have the support he needed and got an obsessive thought in his head and took it way too far. And obviously his mother, who did not have time for him and probably should have, did not deal well with that either.
Here's what Valerie said, Sisi said, which is, Rudolph's bullet killed my faith. And also the death of Rudolph meant in terms of, okay, it sets up a chain of events that leads to World War I.
Basically, he caused World War I.
Yeah. So what happened is that So Rudolf had no son, so succession passed to Emperor Franz Joseph's, like Sisi's husband's brother, Archduke Karl Ludwig, and his eldest son, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And the assassination of Franz Ferdinand set off a chain of events that would lead to World War I.
And the name of a band.
Yeah, which is what I think of first, honestly. But after Rudolph's death, Sisi only ever wore black ever again, which made her even more recognizable as much as she wanted to be anonymous. She's like 5'8", little tiny waist, all in black, carrying her fan.
Massive hair.
Ankle length hair, carrying a black fan and a white parasol. It's like you could like it's. I wouldn't even wear as Waldo that. Like she's just like very.
She was not hiding well.
No, as much as she did not want to be seen or noticed, she was like wildly visible. And the Mayerling scandal increased public interest in Sisi, who was just like, remember her? She's beautiful. And then she was like an equestrian, and then like she maybe had lovers.
So tragic. Her cousin died mysteriously, her father died, and now her son died in these tragic circumstances. Maybe the same for her.
Yeah, I know. So it's really, it's a dead man walking situation. And now we're just going to take a break for a word from our sponsors.
Talmor, Shishin Murachi. Talmor is my home. My family have worked the land for generations. My gran says the island does not belong to us, but we belong to the island. And we must be ready, for a great evil is coming, and death follows with it.
Listen and subscribe to the latest season of Undertow, The Harrowing, a Storyglass production presented by Realm, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Rob Benedict.
And I am Richard Spate. We were both on a little show you might know called Supernatural.
It had a pretty good run, 15 seasons, 327 episodes.
And though we have seen, of course, every episode many times, we figured, hey, now that we're wrapped, let's watch it all again.
And we can't do that alone, so we're inviting the cast and crew that made the show along for the ride. We've got writers, producers, composers, directors, and we'll of course have some actors on as well, including some certain guys that played some certain pretty iconic brothers.
It was kind of a little bit of a left field choice in the best way possible.
The note from Kripke was, he's great, we love him, but we're looking for like a really intelligent Duchovny type.
With 15 seasons to explore, it's going to be the road trip of several lifetimes. So please join us and subscribe to Supernatural Then and Now.
People often look at me with confusion when I ask them what their only one in the room story is. They think it has to be like mine, where I went to a 600-person event and discovered that I was the only Black person there. I know. Horrifying, right? Hi, I'm Laura Cathcart-Robbins, and I am the host and creator of the podcast Only One in the Room. Every week, my co-host Scott Slaughter and I invite you to join us for an hour and lose yourself in someone's only one story. This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt alone in a room full of people, which is to say that this podcast is for everyone.
And we're back. Although after he died, she commissioned the building of a palace on the island of Corfu, which she named after Homer's hero Achilles in the Iliad. She called it the Achilleion. So Corfu is in or near Greece, I think, because remember all of her friends were Greek. So I think they probably really got her into like the Iliad, etc. The building was purchased later by German Emperor Wilhelm II. Later, it was acquired by the nation of Greece, now Greek National Tourism Organization, and converted to a museum. Anyway, so Rudolf, the Mayerling Incident happened. I'll just mention that the name of the girl who died in it was Mary Vetsera. The next year, Sisi's sister Duchess Sophie died, as well as her friend Count Gyula Andrassy, about whom her daughter Valerie said she clung to him with true and steadfast friendship as she did perhaps to no other person. When he died, Sisi wrote, "My last and only friend is dead." Then the next year, her sister Nene died, and then 2 years later, her mother died. So yeah, she's going to wear black for the rest of her life, because if you add this all up, like there's a lot of mourning to do.
And finally Franz Joseph is worried about her mental health.
Yeah. He's like,
finally, at this
how's she
point.
doing? So she kept traveling. So dressed in black, she traveled across the continent and North Africa, refusing police protection, determined to travel the whole world over. This is her words, until I drown and am forgotten. So she's
taking lots of risks.
Yeah.
Lots of risks.
Yeah. At the age of 51, she got a tattoo of an anchor on her arm, which is the first I know of a vulgar history woman getting a tattoo. So she's engaging in some, I would say, self-destructive behavior.
Yeah. She's not being careful. She's not actually traveling incognito. Like she says she's traveling. She's not actually traveling incognito.
Yeah. She's got maybe a bit of a death wish.
Sorry, I spent a lot of time studying World War I. Franz Joseph is like genuinely concerned and does recognize the possibility is very high that she will harm herself.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of him, she spent little time in Vienna with him, although their correspondence increased during this era a bit, and their relationship became a warm friendship, as evidenced by the letters.
Which is like, that's actually good. Like that, I like that because that's what she wanted from him in the first place.
Yeah. So let's see. So she traveled on the imperial steamer Miramar through the Mediterranean. Her favorite places included Cape Martin on the French Riviera, San Remo on the Ligurian Riviera, where tourism had only started the second half of the 19th century, Lake Geneva in Switzerland, Bad Ischl in Austria, and Corfu. She also visited countries not usually visited by European royals at the time: Morocco, Algeria, Malta, Turkey, and Egypt. And she was going to, so this is like the tourism industry was very just beginning. So it's not just like she's traveling and refusing bodyguards. She's going to like, at this point, like very remote areas where there's not like a hotel you can just check into. Like she's having adventures, but she's going to kind of off the beaten path type areas.
She's not going to Rome and she's not doing the things you would expect a Victorian to do. She's being a genuine tourist. Like with her, she wanted to be around the actual people. So she's not pulling her whole entourage into Egypt and causing a disruption there. She's finding a place to stay in Egypt and experiencing that place.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like the stuff I read about, she'd go to the hospital and visit people. Like she'd bring like one lady in waiting with her, maybe. Like she wasn't. Yeah. So she was, but also just in terms of like how, like, this is the era, like, we're going to get to things, but like there's a lot of assassinations and various people wandering around shooting and stabbing various people. So
there's also a lot of unrest happening. So this is when Franz Joseph's not sitting at home going, my wife is traveling a lot. Like he annexed Bosnia Herzegovina and Serbia and like brought them into Austria kind of against their wishes. There's a lot of nationalism rising up, and there's a lot of sentiment within the community, in that community in particular, of separatism and finding their own individual nationalism. But then there's also the anarchists all over, and this new anti-modernity. Marxism is on the rise. Socialism, other forms of socialism are on the rise in a more contrary, like anti-statist mentality of anarchism and socialism.
There's also an anti-monarchy moment happening.
Yes,
too.
It's a very big anti-monarchy, and anti-monarchy. Austro-Hungarian Empire, even though it is far smaller than it ever was before, still holds that old money, the old world aspect to it, because the Habsburgs have been around since the 1200s.
Yeah.
So it was a symbol. In addition to simply being the current leadership, they're also symbols of this old Europe.
Right. And that's the thing. That's who is, like, people like Franz Joseph is being targeted, not, well, partially maybe because of the stuff he did, but also just symbolically, like to assassinate the emperor would be.
the eventual killing of Franz Ferdinand was a symbolic murder. There wasn't really a whole, like their power had waned so much. It wasn't going to make Serbia free, but it was a very symbolic murder that started World War I and fundamentally changed Europe and the world.
Yeah.
But those kinds of the risk had started at this period, because that was only like, this is the 80s, late 80s, 90s, and this is going to be the murder of Franz Ferdinand was 1911. So
yeah,
it's 20-year period.
It's an extended period of just unrest.
There's also a fiscal downturn during that period. Worldwide depression. One of the first worldwide depressions was in 1890. So there's also a fiscal downturn.
And that would lead to all this stuff like people becoming more radicalized. Mm-hmm. So she built the Achilleon on Corfu, and Franz Joseph was just like, maybe she'll like stay there and like retire there forever. But she was just like moving on. So here's a quote from her. Oh, I think this is actually a poem of hers. I loved, I lived, I wandered through the world, but never reached what I strove for. So she's just like on the go. 1898. Despite warnings of possible assassination attempts, Sisi, now age 60, traveled to Geneva, Switzerland under her assumed name.
And she's been using for nearly a decade at this point.
And her wildly identifiable appearance. But someone from the hotel where she was staying recognized her and revealed that she was their guest. And then the next day in the newspaper, it said, like, guess who's in town? Sisi.
She calls herself Hohenems.
You can recognize her by her black dress, her ankle-length hair, fan, and parasol. So, also in town was the Italian anarchist Luigi Lucchini, who had come to Switzerland to assassinate Prince Henri of Orleans in an active protest against the ruling class.
Tender to the throne of France.
So, my notes here just to summarize some of what you just said. Over 3 decades, beginning in 1880, anarchists killed a Russian czar, 2 Spanish premiers, a French president, and an Italian king.
And in the next 2 years, 2 years after this would kill, 3 years after this would kill the president of the United States.
And then Teddy Roosevelt became president.
Yes! And was Teddy Roosevelt supposed to be president?
No.
Why not?
Because he wasn't popular with the party.
Yes, his own party hated him and made him vice president to get him out of the way.
But then he became president because the president was killed. This is American history Lana has taught me.
My part of my job is teaching Anne American history, and I'm very proud when she remembers part of it.
Yeah.
Of course, most of that is because I made you also watch The Alienist, and you started learning who Teddy Roosevelt was.
Well, and if you watch The Alienist, the like murder mystery show taking place in oldie times, New York, Teddy Roosevelt is like the chief of police, and I was like, wait, Teddy Roosevelt's the chief of police? I'm like, Lana, why is Teddy Roosevelt on this show? Is this made up? And then you explained to me a lot about Teddy Roosevelt. Anyway, so Luigi Lucchini is in town. He wants to assassinate the Prince of Orleans. And then, but it turns out
he wasn't even really much of a prince of anything. Like he was the pretender to the throne of France, which France was this is 100 years after the French Revolution. Like
there's not, yeah.
It's 75 years after Napoleon. There's no rulers here. This is
I don't know.
all
Luigi's an anarchist, he's just doing his own thing. So, but the prince canceled his trip. But then Luigi Lucchini, I imagine, reads the newspaper. Sisi's in town. She was easy to identify, and she traveled without protection officers. So she was out walking with one of her ladies in waiting. I don't know if this is one of her like marathon 8-hour walks. Anyway, no, it wasn't. She was walking along a dock to board a ship.
She was leaving.
Yeah, Luigi approached her, attacked her with a small triangular, like a sharpened file. Sisi thought that Sisi fell, but she was cushioned by her gigantic amount of hair. So she wasn't injured in the fall. And she stood up thinking she had been punched. But what had happened was that he had the combination of like the tight laced leather corset and the smallness of the nail file, or not a nail file, but like the file, like it was a very small wound.
It was a needle file.
Yeah.
It's a file specifically for needles, so it's very, very small.
Okay. Yes, it's a very small thing. And so she bled out so slowly that she like got on the ship.
She bled into herself.
Yeah.
So if anybody's watched Sherlock, the wedding episode, that is based on Sisi's murder. She was the tight-laced corset kept everything contained, and she slowly bled into her pericardium. By the time they figured out what was going on, there was no blood in her veins anymore.
Yeah.
Like, she bled in.
So
it seems
so at first it seemed like she had just fainted or something, but then they realized that
like it was hours later. Like she just kept going and everything was fine.
Like
and
no one
made
knew.
It to the boat.
Yeah. When her husband, Franz Joseph, now her widower, I guess, when he received a telegram informing him of her death, he assumed at first that she had died by suicide. But a later message arrived detailing the assassination. And then he was like, oh, not that that's reassuring necessarily, but
it was probably comforting to know that she'd continued. Like she was still living.
Yeah, she was still going.
She was still living. And living for herself in the way that she'd found that worked for her. And she hadn't given up. And sometimes when we're in those situations, like you find the ways to continue going. Like your brain weasels tell you things and you find ways around the brain weasels and knowing from experience, like it's nice to know that they continue to fight.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. Yeah. So, and Sisi never stopped. Until someone stopped her. So Geneva went into mourning. Sisi's body was placed in a triple coffin, 2 inner ones of lead, the third exterior one of bronze, reposing on lion claws. The coffin was fitted with 2 glass panels covered with doors, which could be slid back to allow her face to be seen, which she would have hated because after she was age 32, she's just like, no one can ever see my face. Her body was carried back to Vienna on a funeral train. The inscription on her coffin read, Sisi, Empress of Austria. The Hungarians were outraged.
Also hated.
The Hungarians were outraged, and the words, and Queen of Hungary, were hastily added. The entire Austro-Hungarian Empire was in deep mourning. 82 sovereigns and high-ranking nobles followed her funeral cortege on the morning of September 17th to the tomb. And I think his friend Joseph said something about where he was just like, of all the people to assassinate, like she went to visit people in hospitals. She was like a kind person. Like she was like basically apolitical. He's just like, she's like her, like what? But it was symbolic, I guess. And she was
also accessible. Like she there's a thing about like the Patty Hearst kidnapping. Patty Hearst is a very strange person to kidnap, but she was the richest person that didn't have any form of security or protections around her. Like, sometimes history is made by accessibility.
Exactly. But just in his grief, I guess Franz Joseph was being like, she was the best of us all, etc.
Well, he's going to say that about anybody. Any way she died, he's going to say she was the best of us all. She didn't deserve to go.
So once it was discovered that an Italian was responsible for this assassination, unrest swept Vienna and reprisals were threatened against Italians. The intensity of shock, mourning, and outrage far exceeded that which occurred at the news of Rudolph's death. An outcry erupted over the lack of protection for the Empress, and the Swiss police had to be like, no, we tried, like we offered, like we wanted to help. She wouldn't let us protect her. Like she had detected his officers outside the hotel the day before the assassination and protest. Surveillance was disagreeable, so he had no choice but to withdraw them. And Luigi had been following the Empress for several days, waiting for an opportunity. So that was the moment that he chose.
It's also the way he killed her. Like it would have just looked like she'd been hit.
Yeah.
And not all entourages could even stop something like that.
Yeah. Like it seemed like someone had just,
It was a very strange kind of murder. And, And it was weird. Like even their ability to find the murder weapon was like, I didn't even know what he was throwing away. But now that you tell me to look for something, I found this thing. Could it be this?
Yeah. And it's a very like, it was on Sherlock, but I feel like it's a very Sherlock Holmes-esque. It's like, wait, what did she die of? Wait, why isn't there blood? Like, wait, what was the weapon? But yeah, so since Sisi was famous for preferring the common man to courtiers, known for her charitable works, and considered such a blameless target, Luigi's sanity was questioned initially because people were just like, why would you kill Sisi? Like, you must be insane. Where it's like, no, like you just said, it's like, that was who he could get to.
He was an anarchist. Anarchists
Yeah,
are anti-statist. He wanted to kill somebody. She was available.
Yeah. So his will, or her will, stipulated a large part of her jewel collection should be sold, and the proceeds were to be applied to various religious and charitable organizations. Oh, here's what Franz Joseph said. That a man could be found to attack such a woman whose whole life was spent in doing good and who never injured any person is to me incomprehensible. Everything outside of the crown jewels and state property that Sisi had the power to bequeath was left to her granddaughter, the Archduchess Sisi, Rudolph's child. Oh, and the Sisi stars, the like gold, like she had given those away sort of one at a time to various people who she appreciated. So those weren't around to bequeath to anyone anymore. Upon her death, Franz Joseph founded the Order of Elisabeth in memory of her. And there are numerous statues created in her honor, as well as chapels, parks, and bridges in several countries, including lots in Hungary. Various residences that she frequented are preserved and open to the public as museums. There was an operetta. There is plays, musicals, ballets, films, TV shows, the German films. I think there's something about those air. You said that there's the Y author who watches the 3 Sisi films every year, but I think they air on TV in Germany and maybe some other countries. Yeah. It's like a Christmas tradition, like the way that people would watch, I don't know, Christmas Carol or whatever. It's like
on Easter, you watch 10 Commandments.
Yeah. And at Christmas, well, because she had a Christmas birthday, right?
Yeah.
So
Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve birthday. There's going to be this new Netflix series coming out soon. There are lots of historical fiction books about Sisi, including one of the Royal Diaries. And we're going to move on to the scoring of Sisi. I'm going to leave this entirely in your hands, Lana, just because you know her. Well, I mean, okay. I'll have opinions, but so
you're going to have to prompt me because unlike with Vulgar Piece Theater, I am not on top of what the scoring categories are.
So the first category, and you're scoring between 0 and 10, is scandaliciousness. And this is for her an interesting one because a lot of the stuff she did to me, I'm like, okay, but the people of Viennese court were like, what? Like,
we're going to start measuring yourself by the people of Viennese court. We're all scandalicious, and that's just sad.
That's true. Yeah. So it's just like how
she's not scandal. Like the people around her were very scandal. Like Rudolph, he wins. He's an 11.
Yeah.
But like Sisi, like I'd give her maybe a 5. Like scandalicious is not what makes her story interesting.
No, she wasn't. No, exactly. Like, and the stuff that she did that people saw as scandalous were stuff like
she's just trying to take care of herself. It was self-care.
She visited patients in a hospital. Like these are things like, I don't know.
Sorry, I'm a good person. Okay.
Yeah. The culture she was in found things about her scandalous that like she was not doing to be scandalous. I guess that's the thing. She didn't intend to be seen that way. Even though some of her actions were seen that way, that wasn't the intent.
And like sometimes she was like, she pushed boundaries with the Hungarian thing. Like she full on exchanged sex with her husband for recognition of Hungary as an equal partner to Austria. Yeah. Like that is probably the most scandalous thing she did. And she fostered relationships that were open to rumors, but not like it was scandalous. She could have stopped doing that, but that was not like, she didn't want to.
Like she had friendships with men, which that was just scandalous because she was the Empress. But the relationships themselves are just friendships. Like they weren't.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's the most scandalous thing about her is that she was going to be friends with men. She's going to stay friends with men and you weren't going to stop her.
And I guess also the fact that she like hired Hungarian staff or whatever.
Yes.
Like
lower nobility.
Yeah. So 5. The next one is it's scheminess, but I do want to clarify that this isn't necessarily like, I'm scheming, but just like cleverness. Like her, I don't know, like how the ability to make up a plan and execute it, like being quick on her feet. Like,
I don't know that I'd give her credit for being quick on her feet, but I think she is like bullheaded enough Like, she's going to find a way to get her way.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to try I don't know that she was very smart about manipulating people because people were kind of hard for her. But she wasn't going to stop until she got her way, until she figured out how to ask them or how to say the thing that she wanted.
Yeah.
So I'd give her a 7.
I think so.
Sheer effort, because
tenacity. And she did have success, like the Austria-Hungary thing again. Like the fact that she was just like, that was her. Like she made that because of her mediation and her manipulation of her husband.
Mistress.
Gave her husband a mistress. Yeah, I think, she had some schemes.
She used her husband to get the kid away from Sophie. Like it didn't come easy to her.
No, it's exactly
about it.
Yeah, like as a child, like if none of this had happened, if she had married off to some whatever Bavarian lord or something, she would just like continue just like living in the woods and riding horses and just like having a nice time. She wasn't like a schemy person by nature, but she eventually figured out a way that she could be schemy on her own terms.
She was good at figuring out how to get her way in a system that the few things she wanted were the things that were forbidden from her.
Yeah. Well, even the fact that she was freedom. Like, well, I'm having my hair styled, I'm just gonna like learn a couple languages.
Just learn a couple foreign languages you don't want me to know. Like not the good ones.
Yeah.
The useful ones.
See, that's schemy to me. The next one is her significance, and you can interpret that however you want.
I'm gonna put this like probably a little like I'm probably gonna put this again at a 7. Like she wasn't moving nations, but and I don't think she like had any real direct influence over mental health. But I don't think the progression that we have towards the kind of mental health care that we have now, which went through some real dark eras and real dark ages in between now and then, I don't think the progression would have happened if she hadn't been someone who fostered that in the Viennese community at that time, because it gave rise to Jung and Freud, and it made a space for them to exist in a community that probably wouldn't normally want them to be there. And so I would say like that part of her influence is pretty high. And she has a Barbie doll. Like in the 90s, she got a Barbie doll. Like not many queens got Barbie dolls.
No. I don't know if anyone I've done on Vulgar History before has had a Barbie doll to be that significant.
100 years after your death.
Yeah. Well, and then also the movie, I think. Well, I think part of why she is known is because of those movies from the 50s as well. Mm-hmm. And then the sexism bonus, like how much did sexism hold her back?
I think by this point in time, I don't know that it did. I don't think sexism was a thing that she had to, like, I don't think she gets any bonuses for that because like literally she's living in the time period where women are going to college. Like women are achieving, Marie Curie is studying radium. Like there are women doing far more interesting things than her. She gets that bonus of you're expected to like if she gets 1 or 2 points, it's because her job was to have children and she found a way around that.
The sexism bonus is like, how much more could she have done if not for the patriarchy? But for her, it's not really well, it is, but it's also
it is the patriarchy, but it's not any more patriarchy than our grandmothers had.
Yeah. Well, it's like she was married off at age 15. She was she's put in, but that's not, I don't know. Like she did as best as she could given those circumstances. So how much are you giving her? 3?
1 or 2, like 2.
Okay. So that's
like, it's not, the odds are not stacked against her the way a lot of the women in history are. She could own property. She could, could have gone to college.
And she was, well, and even like, not that she did, but like she was able to travel independently. Yeah. Like she was able to hang out.
She was able to tell people no. She was able to tell people no.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't life-threatening to do. Well, it was, but like not in the way, not the telling people no was not life-threatening. The things that she was telling them no for were ill-advised.
So ultimately, her grand total is, I'm going to tell you the number, then I'm going to tell you the company that she's keeping. Okay. So her total is 21, which in the context of this podcast, I think is a fair assessment given what we're scoring people on. Given that she's a different sort of person than what we often talk about. But here's the thing, you know, who is a 20? Caroline of Brunswick. So
she's the goat. So I would, that is the company I want to keep.
Exactly. I like that they're together and just kind of like they could, like Caroline of Brunswick also memorably took various trips around the Mediterranean. She
found a way to her own freedom. They're the same kind of people that found their freedom despite the odds stacked against them.
They were both raised quasi-feral in Germany and then were married into families where they didn't really fit.
And in one case, it was to a dude that did not want to be married to her. And in another case, it was to a dude that very much did want to be married to her. Yeah. And so that influenced their outcomes. But yes, that's like they're interesting people. They don't have to be schemy or badass to be interesting.
No, exactly. And I hope that you have made, with me assisting a little bit, a good case for why she deserves to be remembered for much more than her diet tips and hair length.
I mean, I love her hair, don't get me wrong, but that's the introduction is look at this cool hair. Now meet the rest of her.
Exactly. And that's the Hortense Mancini effect, where you're just like, well, this looks cool. Is their story interesting? Oh, it is. So like cool hair in a portrait, to me, it's 2 for 2 between these two. They both led to great stories. Lana, can you just remind everybody about your excellent books and where they can find you to follow you on social media and things?
All right. My first novel was Technically You Started It, which is a text transcript of 2 very nerdy teenagers as they slowly fall in love, even though they hate each other in real life. And it's companion novel, Speak for Yourself, which is set in the same nerdy high school. Those are both available wherever fine books are sold, mostly online at this point, because it's been a couple of years. And I am available online everywhere you can find me at Mulibris, Muliebris, because one day I needed a name that did not have an account that did not have numbers in Hotmail, and I liked that. So.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, and I think everybody should. Thank you so much for, helping tippy-toe my way towards a Habsburg moment. It's just there's so many of them, and they're all called Marie.
You can't avoid them forever.
But I will continue to try. Thank you. So we mentioned this in the episode, but again, you can find out more about Lana at lanawoodjohnson.com. I think if you're a fan of this podcast, then you will really enjoy her 2 YA novels, Speak for Yourself and Technically You Started It, which are both, as she mentioned in the episode, they are young adult contemporary novels, but they're also, if you're into all the history, Easter eggs and stuff, they're actually not so secretly based on historical stories and people and books. So I'm still figuring out what would be a good CC item to put in the shop. So stay tuned for that. I always announce stuff like that on Instagram and stuff, but you can shop Vulgar History merch at vulgarhistory.store. Whenever you're shopping, remember you can use code TITSOUT for free US shipping or TITSOUT10 for 10% off. There's all the Hortense stuff is there. We've got stuff throughout this whole international season and from previous seasons. The summer collection, it's still there, at least at the point at which you're hearing this episode. The Tits Out, we've got the slides, we've got the tanks, various things. Anyway, I've got ideas coming up for like fall merch, but anyway, stay tuned for that. You can leave comments and feedback at vulgarhistory.com. There's a button there for you to contact me if you have ideas. I'm still really open, and I will always be open to ideas from you of other historical figures that you think would be good topics for this podcast, especially internationale figures who maybe are not as well known outside of the country or culture from which you're from. And if you want to support the podcast, you can get ad-free episodes as well as early access, usually about 5 days early, when you join patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter. So that's where, if you pledge at least $1 a month, you get the ad-free early access to the episodes. If you pledge $5 or more a month, then you get access to the extra episodes. Like, so this asshole, I most recently did Louis XIV, Vulgar Piece Theater, the episode about Les Miserables, I think should be there by the time you're listening to this. Anyway, otherwise, you can keep up with me and this podcast at Instagram, where we are Vulgar History Pod, or on Twitter at Vulgar History. And until next time, keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is hosted, written, and researched by Ann Foster and edited by Christina Lumagi.
I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
We're the Ghost Story Guys.
And every 2 weeks, we explore first-person stories of encounters with the paranormal from all around the world.
Then we have some fun reacting to those stories. We like to say our goal is to scare the hell out of you, then make you laugh.
Belief in the paranormal is not required. All you need is a love of great storytelling and curiosity about the world around you.
Subscribe to the Ghost Story Guys now on your favorite podcatcher to hear episodes like High Strangeness in Chicago, The Mystery of Missing Time, and The Haunting of Vietnam, along with dozens of others.
We've talked about mythical bridges, doppelgangers, haunted seaside towns, and so much more.
Remember that story about the guy who was trapped inside a dream and something was hunting him? That was upsetting.
Yes it was.
Want us to help ruin your sleep? Come find the Ghost Story Guys on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else fine podcasts live, or at ghoststoryguys.com.
Contained herein are the heresies of Radolf Buntwine, erstwhile monk turned traveling medical investigator. Join me as I study the secrets of the divine plagues and uncover the blasphemous truth that ours is not a loving God, and we are not its favored children. The heresies of Radolf Buntwine, wherever podcasts are available.